Welcome back to the deep dive. If you are joining us, you know the drill. We take a mountain of complex source material, filter out the noise, and really get straight to the knowledge that genuinely informs. You've handed us a magnificent stack this time, focusing on one of the 20th century's most explosive and, I think, enduring cultural movements, and how it utterly transformed visual media.
That's right. Today's deep dive is dedicated to the profound and really multifaceted influence of hip-hop on film and television. The sources, well, they're an academic exploration, positioning hip-hop not just as a music genre, but as a complete cultural system.
Yeah.
Our material asserts that, look, few cultural movements have reshaped the global entertainment landscape, from narrative structure right down to visual aesthetics, as fundamentally as this one has.
Yeah, and when we approach this, we are aiming far beyond just surface-level observations. We're not just noting, oh, a rap song played in that movie.
No, not at all.
Our sources compel us to see how hip-hop provided, well, almost a new cinematic language.
Exactly. Our mission today is to pull apart that multifaceted impact for you, the listener, across cultural, aesthetic, social, and yes, economic lines too. We'll use this source material as our comprehensive guide to understand how this culture, born from necessity really, has been reflected, shaped, celebrated, and, crucially, sometimes exploited and commodified by screen media over the last, 5 decades?
Okay, let's unpack this enormous subject then. We're moving from the beats and the rhymes to see precisely how the ethos, the energy of hip-hop became, like you said, a visual storytelling code.
Right. So to understand the cinematic impact, we absolutely must start at the genesis, as the sources emphatically do. The birth of this movement is clearly grounded in a specific place and time. The marginalized neighborhoods of the South Bronx in the 1970s.
Yeah.
This context is far more than just an origin story. It's the foundation of its narrative power, isn't it?
This specific point of origin is paramount. It really is. The source material makes it crystal clear that hip-hop was a creative response to systemic decay. A period of civic neglect, divestment, serious hardship in New York City.
Yeah.
The movement emerged where there was a void, essentially.
Yeah.
It wasn't defined merely as a new type of music, but rather, as the sources put it, a declaration of identity, resilience, and rebellion.
A declaration, not just an entertainment form. I was struck by how the sources framed those early elements, DJing, MCing, b-boying, or breakdancing and graffiti, as actual forms of reclamation. They were reclaiming space, reclaiming narrative, reclaiming resources in a way.
That's the key analytical point. I mean, consider the technical innovation itself. DJ Kool Herc extending the breaks, the rhythmic core of the music, right?
Yeah.
That act was fundamentally about maximizing a moment, creating more space for collective movement, for joy, in an environment defined by limitations.
Making something from almost nothing. Exactly. The spirit of making something from nothing, of radical self-definition, that's the context you need when you later see the visual narratives of triumph and struggle on screen. If you overlook that rebellious origin, the later commercial representations just lose their depth. You miss the point.
And that energy, born from those specific urgent circumstances, it proved globally infectious, didn't it?
Oh.
And culturally scalable. I mean, today it's certainly not an underground phenomenon or just a regional genre.
Oh, no, not at all. The sources clearly demonstrate the complete saturation. Hip-hop permeates nearly every corner of popular culture, transcending music into fashion, advertising, even social media dynamics. Its widespread penetration transformed it from a niche cultural expression into, well, the language of global youth culture and aspiration, really.
And once a culture reaches that level of complete global penetration, collision with, and transformation of visual media, film, and television, it becomes, well, inevitable.
It does.
It set the stage for a total overhaul, challenging the established, often white-centric cinematic language of Hollywood with a new, urgent, rhythmic sensibility. The culture demanded to be seen, and it dictated how it would be seen. Okay, so now we transition from those origins to the crucial function of hip-hop, its capacity for detailed first-person storytelling. The source material draws a strong academic parallel here, highlighting this concept of rappers as griots,
Right.
like oral historians who translate lived experiences, community history, moral lessons into rhythm and rhyme.
What's fascinating here, I think, is that the function of the griot in the West African tradition, specifically, is to preserve history and genealogy. So when screenwriters and filmmakers tapped into hip-hop, they weren't just getting music. They were absorbing a ready-made narrative structure, a moral compass, and crucially, a perspective that demanded authenticity in depicting urban life. This direct link between the storytelling tradition of the MC and the cinematic need for compelling narrative, well, that's probably the most significant conceptual crossover.
So this absorption didn't just provide a soundtrack, it actually provided a structural framework for the films.
Exactly. The films that utilize this culture didn't just play rap music in the background. They used the hip-hop ethos, that urgency, the moral dichotomies, the narrative focus on systemic injustice as the core engine of their drama.
Right.
The sources cite several foundational films where this is really evident. That earliest wave of hip-hop cinema in the early 90s established this pattern pretty clearly. Think of John Singleton's Boyz in the Hood from 1991.
Classic.
Absolutely. The narrative arc, tracing the lives of Trey, Ricky, and Doughboy, it's almost a visual analogy for the moral lessons found in the most critical hip-hop lyrics of that era. The dialogue, the dilemmas faced by the characters, they're less about standard Hollywood tropes and more about survival codes specific to the community being depicted.
Yeah, Boys in the Hood uses the music and the whole associated culture, not just to set the scene in South Central LA, but to frame the specific dire stakes of the characters' lives. Stakes which, often ended in tragedy fueled by structural inequality.
Absolutely. Then you have Minnesota Society from 93, which is arguably even more unflinching in its depiction of moral decay and violence. And it utilizes that pervasive first-person voiceover narration.
Yeah, Kane's voiceover.
Right, which is a direct cinematic equivalent of the MC's role, isn't it? Kane's perspective guides you, the viewer, functioning as the urban griot, reflecting on his own fate and the fate of his neighborhood. This constant internal commentary, it's a key structural element pulled directly from that lyrical tradition.
And Juice, from 92, performs a similar function, maybe focusing more on ambition and rivalry, framing the moral decline of Q and Bishop against that backdrop of artistic potential, a conflict you hear about all the time in rap lyrics about success versus selling out.
That's a great point.
So these three films specifically kind of establish the template.
Yeah.
Use the hip-hop gaze to portray race, struggle, and triumph with really unprecedented depth for Hollywood at the time.
And this depth was critical because it forced mainstream audiences to engage with experiences often ignored or, worse, just sensationalized by prior Hollywood productions. However, the sources also introduce a nuance here, an important one.
Okay.
While these films definitely strove for truth-telling, there was immediate friction. Critics, often cited in our source material, question whether the dramatic requirements of cinema, especially the need for conflict and violence, could sometimes inadvertently sensationalize the very experiences they were attempting to authenticate.
Ah, so the medium itself creates a tension.
Exactly. The films face the immediate tension of the griot narrative being packaged, for mass consumption.
So even at this early stage, the screen was already acting as a stage for that internal contradiction. Authentic storytelling potentially getting distorted by the demands of commercial film structure.
Precisely. That tension was there from the start.
Okay, moving past narrative content then, let's look at how hip-hop changed the actual form of filmmaking, how it looked and sounded. Our sources discuss a revolution in cinematic language, asserting that the culture fundamentally redefined the visual and auditory grammar of film.
Yeah, and this is where the technical analysis gets, really interesting. It goes way beyond just the soundtrack. Hip-hop provided a new rhythm for cinema. Films like Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing from '89 cited heavily in our sources. Use Public Enemy's Fight the Power not merely as some background anthem, but as a recurring structural motif. It literally embodied the escalating tension and cultural friction of that hot summer day.
Right, it felt like it was driving the plot almost.
Exactly. The music itself was an actor in the drama, turning rhythm into explicit cinematic language.
And in 8 Mile, from 2002, the sources highlight how the rap battles aren't just entertainment pieces.
No, far from it.
They are the primary mode of dialogue, of conflict resolution, and even character development. The ability to improvise, to rhyme under pressure, that becomes the ultimate mechanism for self-expression and survival for B-Rabbit.
Spot on. And that sonic revolution immediately generated a visual one. The influence of hip-hop aesthetics redefined the very look of cinema, moving away from that classic Hollywood linearity towards something more energized, fractured, and intensely rhythmic.
Okay, so what does that aesthetic adoption look like visually on screen? Can we break down the technical elements the sources cite? Like, what should people look for?
Sure. We see two profound technical and visual crossovers, really driven by hip-hop's core elements. First, there is the immediate symbolic adoption of graffiti-inspired visuals.
Okay, graffiti art.
Right. This means utilizing vibrant, sometimes aggressive color palettes, dynamic typography, interesting use of text on screen, and a sense of visual chaos or energy. Think rapid camera movements, maybe low light, high contrast cinematography that signals the culture instantly.
Right, that gritty but stylish look. And the second technical element, you mentioned the connection between DJ techniques and visual editing earlier. The sources go deeper here.
They absolutely do. This is a fascinating technical crossover rooted in performance practice. Think about the DJ cutting, scratching, looping existing records to create entirely new meaning and rhythm, right? By disrupting linear time.
Yeah, created something new from something old.
Exactly. Filmmakers adopted this cut and mix philosophy for visual sequences. This resulted in rapid editing techniques, often incorporating jump cuts, short, punchy montages.
So the cinematic jump cut becomes the visual equivalent of a scratch on a record, disrupting the smooth flow of space and time.
Precisely. That's a great way to put it. This creates an energized, nonlinear visual pace that mirrors the sonic environment of the club or the streets where the music thrives. Director Hype Williams, who came up through the music video scene, really exemplifies this influence.
Ah, Hype Williams, yeah.
He mastered the use of wide-angle lenses, dramatic shifts in color, kinetic pacing, a style that's just unmissable in films like Belly from 1998.
Right.
The source material points to Belly as a kind of watershed moment where the visual style was completely subordinate to the hyper-stylized, slow-motion, often neon-lit aesthetics of the hip-hop music video world. It looked like a moving album cover sometimes.
So if the early 90s, like we discussed in Section 2, were about translating the content of the griot narrative, the late 90s saw the translation of the rhythm and the visual style of the culture directly into the grammar of cinematic expression itself.
It's an evolution, yeah.
Huh.
Spike Lee's early work laid the groundwork by infusing hip-hop energy into the structure of his films, but by the time you reach directors like Hype Williams, the hip-hop aesthetic is the structure, often prioritizing mood, style, and rhythmic movement over traditional dramatic pacing.
Right.
This signaled that the influence wasn't just thematic anymore, it was, well, tectonic. It was changing professional standards for editing and cinematography across the board, not just in films about hip-hop.
While film wrestled with the aesthetics and the, dramatic depth, television, with its continuous weekly presence in people's homes, played a different, but maybe equally crucial role. Let's shift to the small screen now, and how television played a major part in normalizing hip-hop, bringing it into the mainstream conversation.
Yeah, television is the great disseminator, isn't it? It's capable of domesticating and socializing cultural movements in a way film maybe can't, just due to its reach and repetition. Early cinematic depictions, as we discussed, often focused on the drama, the tragedy, the social urgency.
Right, the heavier stuff.
Exactly. Television, however, over time, allowed hip-hop to become a recurring, accepted, and even sometimes a comedic narrative framework. It reflected hip-hop's own evolution from a movement of raw resistance to a recognized, lucrative mainstream narrative force.
How did earlier television contribute, though, before the big dramas of the 2010s? Did the sources mention any early attempts at normalization, maybe sitcoms or youth shows?
They did, though perhaps indirectly. While not detailing specific sitcoms exhaustively, the sources note that television's acceptance was gradual. It started perhaps with the integration of fashion, maybe speech patterns, into shows aimed at young audiences, effectively making the culture seem more approachable, less threatening perhaps to some viewers. But the major analytical focus in our material lies in how later TV reflected the culture's maturation into an industry.
Okay, so let's focus on those complex later examples.
Yeah.
Empire, for instance, which ran from 2015 to 2020. What specific aspect of hip-hop culture did that show really prioritize?
Empire focused almost exclusively on the music business side of hip-hop.
Right, the corporate angle.
Totally. The corporate ambition, the dynastic family drama, the power struggles, the sheer wealth generated by the genre. It used the hip-hop world as a template for a high-stakes, glossy, primetime soap opera, basically. The show didn't necessarily dwell much on the social injustices that birthed the culture. Its focus was squarely on the struggles of the executives and artists who, well, benefited from its massive success. This marked a clear shift in focus from the street-level griot narrative to the boardroom mogul narrative.
And then you have shows that use the cultural framework not just for industry drama, but to explore broader, perhaps more sophisticated societal issues.
Precisely. Shows like Power, starting in 2014, they continue that earlier cinematic tradition of focusing on organized crime, ambition, moral dilemmas, but they place them firmly within a contemporary corporate-tinged hip-hop cultural context. The characters are dealing with pressures of legacy, legitimacy, crossing over maybe.
But perhaps the most sophisticated example cited in the sources is Donald Glover's Atlanta.
Yeah, Atlanta, running from 2016 to 2022, is critical because it utilizes the cultural framework of the music industry and the city itself, but uses it to reflect highly complex, often surreal facets of contemporary culture, race, and identity.
It really breaks the mold.
It absolutely does. It transcends the typical drama or comedy structure. It uses the periphery of the music world, the managers, the hangers-on, the bizarre, sometimes unsettling racial encounters, to make these broader points about being Black in America today. It signals that hip-hop is no longer just a niche setting for crime drama. It is a full, complex, versatile environment capable of supporting nuanced satire and even existential exploration.
And what's vital here, as the sources emphasize, is the importance of preserving the movement's history, even as the culture goes mainstream and becomes this foundation for serialized drama.
Right, that's the archival function television can also serve. Documentaries play that crucial role of historical preservation and sometimes context correction. Our sources cite examples like the series Hip Hop Evolution.
Great series.
Fantastic series. It shows television actively working to maintain the lineage, to trace the roots. These historical surveys ensure that the raw origins, those Bronx parties, the technical innovations of DJing, the political roots, are not totally subsumed or forgotten amidst the glitter and the commercialized storylines of something like Empire.
So television acts as both things at once.
Exactly. A powerful vehicle for commodification, yes, but also a crucial archive for cultural memory. It holds both roles.
Okay, now we have to address the inherent friction. When a powerful, often rebellious cultural movement like hip-hop gets absorbed by the massive, profit-driven mechanism of film and television, well, contradictions are guaranteed, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the specific tensions cited in the sources.
Yeah, this tension it's almost existential to the relationship.
Yeah.
The source material is very clear about the critical perspective here. The argument that film and television often exploit hip-hop's compelling visual and sonic imagery purely for profit, while either simplifying or sometimes outright neglecting its original political anti-establishment roots. This is the classic battleground where authenticity meets commerce.
So the visual medium takes the recognizable iconography, the specific fashion, the attitude, the tough exterior, the narrative of rags to riches, because it sells easily and translates universally, but maybe leaves the complicated core message of systemic resistance on the cutting room floor.
That is the core accusation from critics, summarized in our sources. It's often referred to as cultural dilution or commodification. The industry, seeking the widest possible audience, inevitably softens those revolutionary edges that might challenge or provoke the comfortable status quo.
And there's an economic consequence.
Absolutely. The sources address this directly, stating explicitly that the entertainment industry has often diluted or commodified the core messages of resilience and rebellion in favor of more easily marketable themes like wealth and power struggles.
But doesn't the source material also contain arguments that view this commercial success not just as exploitation, but maybe as a necessary, if imperfect, balancing act? It's not all negative.
It absolutely does present that other side, and this leads to a more critical synthesis, I think. The tensions we see played out on screen are not just external impositions by Hollywood, they actually mirror hip-hop itself.
Yes.
Well, the sources analyze the culture as a space that has always balanced both resistance and commercialization. Remember, hip-hop is an art form that emerged from poverty and systemic exclusion, yet financial independence and success, often expressed through very visible capitalist symbols of luxury, is a primary, and many would argue legitimate, goal for many participants within the culture.
So the contradiction, the juxtaposition of serious social commentary with, say, hyper-commercialized luxury is kind of baked into the culture itself.
It's baked in, exactly. The presence of this complex struggle on screen is, in many ways, simply a faithful reflection of the culture's own internal dynamics and its constant navigation of a capitalist society.
Right. So the screen media, whether it's a gritty independent film or a glossy network drama like Empire, it just becomes the primary stage for this ongoing negotiation.
Yes. And the story is often about that negotiation. It's about the main character trying to maintain their authenticity while navigating massive commercial pressures. This is the ultimate thematic crossover. the struggle of the artist, or even the genre itself, to survive, succeed, and somehow stay true to its roots all at the same time. The audience, therefore, watches the culture struggle with its own success, played out dramatically.
So rather than seeing commercialization purely as a failure or a selling out, we can view it as the latest, perhaps unavoidable chapter in a long history of negotiation that every successful cultural movement eventually faces.
I think that's a fair reading of the synthesis presented.
It's the visual chronicle of a culture grappling with power, wealth, and its own legacy.
And that negotiation continues to redefine what success looks like, not just in music, but in visual media too. Hashtag tag tag outro.
Okay, as we conclude this deep dive then, having spanned from the birth in the South Bronx through the aesthetics of rapid editing, the narratives on TV, and this internal struggle of commercial success.
Yeah.
What is the unifying, indispensable takeaway for you, the listener? What's the bottom line?
I think the key takeaway is that hip-hop's influence is truly comprehensive. It wasn't just adding a new genre to film scoring or providing cool soundtracks. It functioned simultaneously as both a profound cultural movement and a versatile, enduring cinematic language. It gave filmmakers a whole new set of rules, or maybe possibilities, for rhythm, for narrative authenticity, visual energy, and even moral focus.
And tracing that impact throughout history provides that final piece of context, showing its staying power.
Yes. If you look at the historical sweep, starting with those early raw documentations like Wild Style, which really captured the movement's genesis right there in the streets, and you follow that trajectory through to modern, highly successful cultural epics like Straight Outta Compton, which chronicled the rise of some of the genre's most controversial and successful figures, the pattern is consistent. Hip-hop continues to redefine how stories of race, struggle, and triumph are told, not just in America, but globally. It proves itself again and again to be an evolving, essential cinematic idiom.
And that enduring capacity to redefine narrative, that's what we leave you to reflect on. Since hip-hop, in all its forms, the rebellious, the resilient, the profitable, reflects society's ongoing relationship with the movement itself. What does the current screen representation, with its seamless blend of overwhelming commercial success and its continued insistent demand for critical social depth, what does that tell you about the true state of culture today?
That tension, that balance, that's the story still being written, still being filmed. Ponder the implications of that constant negotiation. It says a lot.
Fascinating stuff indeed. We will see you for the next deep dive.